World War I was a cataclysmic event that shook the very foundations of the world. It stands as a phenomenon so immense and devastating that its scale seems incomprehensible. Spanning continents and reshaping geopolitical landscapes, it plunged nations into misery, economic ruin, and would set the stage for an even more brutal sequel. However, to understand this conflict, we must first understand the spark and how it turned into a world war in the first place. After the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871, the various German states defeat France, and the country becomes unified. It would then annex a part of France that came to be known as Alsace-Lorraine, causing resentment in France against Germany. Meanwhile, Russia, a country that now felt intimidated by this new Germany, signs an alliance with France. Britain, which was also becoming nervous over Germany's ever-growing, stronger navy and its new unstable ruler, Kaiser Wilhelm II, also decide to join the alliance, becoming known as the Triple Entente. Meanwhile, Germany and Austria-Hungary, along with Italy, form the Triple Alliance. In 1914, Franz Duke Ferdinand, the heir to the Austrian throne, is assassinated by a Bosnian Serbian nationalist. Austria-Hungary accuses Serbia being behind the plot, and after sending an ultimatum to Serbia, in which Serbia agrees to nearly all of the ultimatum's demands, Austria-Hungary in response declares war on Serbia. The Germans, hoping to keep this a localized war, send Russia a message telling them not to mobilize to help their ally Serbia. Russia refuses, leading to them declaring war on Austria-Hungary, and in response, Germany declares war on Russia and Serbia. Knowing full well that the French would help their Russian ally, the Germans follow the Schlieffen Plan, which aims to quickly knock out France whilst Russia mobilizes. And so, by attacking through Belgium and Luxembourg, this would avoid the strong French fortifications along the Franco-German border. Facing no real resistance in Luxembourg, the Germans would face it in Belgium, and Britain, which initially decided to stay out of the war, would declare war on Germany after they saw what Germany was doing in Belgium. The Germans hoped that the Belgians wouldn't really fight back, but they were wrong. The Germans tear through Belgium, and news of their atrocities against Belgian civilians soon gained an international audience, as pictures are posted in foreign newspapers. Montenegro then joins the Entente to help out its ally Serbia. Meanwhile, the Germans pour into northern France as they attempt to capture Paris, but they are stopped at the Battle of the Marne, thanks to newly arrived French troops who take taxis to quickly get to the front lines, helping their fellow French and allied British troops. From there, they exploit a gap in the German defence lines, pushing their German enemies back. In East Asia, Japan, which saw an opportunity to reduce European influence in the region, and at the time was allied with Britain, declared war on Germany and began seizing its colonies. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the Russians launched their first offensives. The one against Austria-Hungary was successful, but the one on Germany less so, as the Russians enter and then get pushed out of East Prussia. From there, the Germans invade Russian Poland and present themselves as the liberators of Poles. Meanwhile, news of the German invasion of Belgium and the atrocities committed against civilians there spread rapidly, fueling international outrage. Meanwhile, in Africa, fighting breaks out between the British, French and Belgian colonies against the German colonies. In the Pacific, the Australians take German New Guinea, but with the failure of the Schlieffen Plan, the German armies tried to outflank the British, French and Belgian armies as they raced to get to the sea. The Belgians, in their desperation, flood their land, which helps slow and stabilise the front. The wider front goes static when both sides dig in, forming trenches. In September, Russia, Britain and France make an agreement not to sign a separate peace treaty with the two Central Powers. Together, they form the Allied Powers. In the Middle East, the declining Ottoman Empire, seeking to regain lost territories and having a strong relationship with the Germans, encouraged some pro-war Ottomans to initiate a naval attack on a Russian port in the Black Sea, causing Russia to declare war on the Ottomans, opening a new front up in the Caucasus. The Ottomans then launch an offensive against Russia there, but with winter coming, many Ottomans who weren't prepared for the winter freeze in the bitter conditions. Then, in December, on most sections of the front, a brief truce led to the war temporarily stopping, as most countries celebrate Christmas. As both sides enter 1915 and realise that this wouldn't be a short war, they decide to up the stakes. German Zeppelin airships launch bombing raids against the UK, causing sheer terror in places such as London. Whilst the Ottomans invade British Egypt in an attempt to take the Suez Canal, cutting off the supply line to British India, whilst Britain and Germany begin a naval blockade of each other, with Germany using its submarines to sink neutral shipping heading for Europe. After the sinking of a civilian British ship, the Lusitania, which was carrying many Americans, the US protest, and the Germans then agreed to scale down their naval attacks, promising to warn ships before they attack and to be much more careful when it came to sinking ships. In 1915, the Allies attempt to break the stalemate on the Western Front with offensives such as the Battle of Neuve-Chapelle, the Second Battle of Ypres, and the Battle of Loos. These offensives saw little success and resulted in heavy casualties for both sides. The Second Battle of Ypres saw the Germans use for the first time lethal chemical gas, which the Allies had not encountered before. Soon, both sides would employ this against each other, despite it being illegal. In the Middle East, to support their Russian allies, the French and British land in Gallipoli to try and take the straits from the Ottomans, who they perceive as weak, but they get bogged down and soon withdraw from the straits. With these failures, the allies now intended to enlist more help. Switzerland, oh no, I mean Italy, originally a member of the Triple Alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary, desired lots of new land in the Balkans, and it just so happened to be from Austria-Hungary, and so they joined the Allies. However, the mountainous terrain led to a stalemate when Italy tried to attack Austria-Hungary. In contrast, Bulgaria, a nation seeking to regain lost territory in the Balkans, was approached by the Central Powers with promises of territorial expansion if they joined the war on their side. Bulgaria, bitter from its previous defeat in the Second Balkan War, agreed, and Serbia, which had surprisingly held out against a far larger enemy up until this point, couldn't cope with yet another front, and so was defeated, as Serbian troops abandoned Serbia and fled into Albania. From there, Bulgarian and Austro-Hungarian forces invaded Montenegro and neutral Albania as they chased down what was left of the Serbian army, who travelled across the Adriatic Sea to get to friendly Italy. The following year, in 1916, Portugal was asked by the British if it could seize German ships in Portuguese ports, invoking its long-running alliance with the country, and the Portuguese did. In response, Germany declared war on Portugal, and some minor fighting erupts in Portuguese colonies in Africa as the Germans invade. Then, in the Middle East, the British also decided to move troops to Kuwait to protect Persia's oil fields, from where they then sent a small force to try and take Ottoman Baghdad, but fail as they are sieged in the town of Kut along the way. Back in Europe, Irish revolutionaries, with the backing of Germany, stage an uprising in Dublin, seeking full Irish independence from the British, but it is crushed brutally. Then, Germany decides to attack at Verdun, a French city that held a prominent place in national French pride, believing correctly that the French would do anything to defend it. The battle dragged on, with tens of thousands of Germans and French dying every single day. To support their French allies, the British introduced conscription and launched their own attack at the Somme, using a technology called tanks in an effort to break the deadlock. Unlike Verdun, Germans knew that the attack was coming, and the battle became another bloodbath. Luckily for the Allies in the east, the Russians launched their own offensive, the Brusilov offensive. Carefully planned and well executed, the offensive significantly weakened the Austro-Hungarians, who requested urgent German help to support them. The country was unprepared for the Russian attack due to its offensive in Italy. Even better for the Allies, encouraged by the Russian successes on the Eastern Front and wanting to unite its many Romanian citizens with the wider country, Romania joined the war against the Central Powers, but with a gigantic front line and a well-coordinated Central Power counterattack. Most of the country, including the capital Bucharest, fell to the Central Powers, giving a big blow to the Allies. But with the war still dragging on in February 1917, the Germans become increasingly desperate and, suffering from severe food shortages at home, decide to resume their unrestricted naval warfare in the Atlantic, hoping to cut off Allied supplies, enraging the US. And after more ships with Americans on board get sunk, the US cuts diplomatic relations with Germany, and after Germany encourages Mexico to attack America, America declares war on Germany. Meanwhile, Brazil was facing the same problem. The country was losing many Brazilians on ships, as German submarines also operated in the South Atlantic. The country became increasingly agitated at home, and anti-German riots broke out. Soon, Brazil declared war on the Central Powers as well. Meanwhile, the Greeks, who were very divided over whether they should join the war or not, finally joined the Allies, after large promises of new land in Anatolia. But whilst the Allied powers were gaining allies, they were about to lose some old allies. On the Eastern Front, the situation for Russia deteriorated rapidly due to military defeats, food shortages, and internal unrest. The Russian Revolution erupted in 1917, leading to the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II, and the new government decided to continue the war. However, political instability and a coup led to the government heavily arming the Bolsheviks to help suppress the coup. With the coup over, the Bolsheviks were reluctant to return them, and by the time the government began trying to force them to give up their guns, their coup was underway, and the government was overthrown. What followed was a ceasefire, and then, after some negotiating, Russia signed a peace treaty with the Central Powers, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, in March 1918, effectively ending its involvement in the war. The situation for the Romanians was by now hopeless, and the country decided to eventually sign an armistice. Meanwhile, on the Italian front, the Germans became spooked after Austria-Hungary's new emperor, Karl, attempted to secretly negotiate his country's exit from the war and turn on Germany, and so to reassure his ally, Germany sent troops to the Italian front to help the Austro-Hungarians, and with their help in the Battle of Capriotto, they would push the Italians back. With the Eastern Front now dealt with, Germany was able to shift most of its troops to the Western Front, but the problem was that more Allied troops would soon be arriving, and so the Germans had one final shot at attacking before they arrived, and after a series of successful German attacks, many people now believed that Germany would soon win the war. However, despite losing more land, the Allies held strong, and the arrival of more and more fresh American troops and the exhaustion of German forces resulted in a series of successful Allied counteroffensives in 1918, including the 100 Days Offensive. On the Macedonian front, the Greeks and their Serbian allies pushed north, causing a large number of Bulgarian soldiers to mutiny, and the country soon signed an armistice, a new offensive in the Middle East, with the backing of the Arabs and the Jews, who the Brits had both promised the same land to. Hopefully that won't cause any problems in the future, forced the Ottomans to sign an armistice. Soon, Austria-Hungary followed on November 3rd, and finally, amid mutinies in the German navy, the Kaiser abdicated. Germany was declared a republic, and on November 10th, 1918, Romania re-entered the war, declaring war on Germany. Then finally, the next day, Germany signed the armistice, taking effect at 11 AM. The war officially concluded with the signing of a Treaty of Versailles in June 1919, which imposed heavy penalties on Germany and set the stage for the interwar period. Other treaties would also be thrown on other countries, but their harshness and responsibility for the conflict, which was practically all thrust on Germany, caused widespread resentment, and what followed is why this video is called World War I, instead of the Great War, or the even more hilarious War to End All Wars. With the Allies' victory, many new nations, from Poland to Finland, with different borders came up, and the League of Nations was made in order to prevent another war and uphold this order, but let's just say it didn't work out.